Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Alessandro. I'm the director of the Istituto Italiano di Cultura in Toronto. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today and connecting from Toronto. So good afternoon to everyone here in Toronto, and I hope in Italy who are following us. Here's the first installment of a series of 4 webinars. 4 conversations, actually, on different keywords, on a theme of different keywords that here at the Institute we have conceived to respond and try to respond to the current pandemic. And the Istituto has been closed, as you probably know, or as you can imagine, since from March to July. Then we managed to reopen finally, and we have been moving all our activities online, and still life has been going on for the Istituto, and I've been coming to the office, been in contact with all the partners and the artists that we usually work with us. But of course, everything has changed dramatically. And life as we have conceived it and experienced it before has abruptly changed in a way that was totally unexpected and somehow inconceivable. The first impression we had was that it was just a temporary disruption, but it was soon clear that it wasn't. And now we are still in, and we are still trying to cope with the situation, to find ways to react, to find ways to keep our life going in the best way possible, to keep our relation going as best as possible, and to keep our cultural activities as well, and also to try to reflect and to manage to get an idea more of what can come after this, when this will be over. Shall we go back to the previous normal? Will it be different? So there was a time when even just walking around in town here in Toronto, and even more probably in Italy and in other parts of the world, was an experience that was totally unconceivable before. So the idea of moving in a city that has completely stopped, or apparently completely stopped, that is completely empty, where the space is available in a way that is totally different than it was before, in a city, in an extremely busy city like Toronto. This was really an experience, almost surreal experience. And I've been receiving pictures and calls from friends all over the world, depicting a reality that was of spaces without human presence, which was really both somehow strikingly beautiful aesthetically sometimes, and also frightening, mostly frightening. And the sense of danger that was transmitted by these pictures was really strong. So this is just the reflection that was at the base of this webinars. I've been lucky enough in the past few years to have the opportunity to collaborate with 2 outstanding curators, Francesca Molteni and Sasha Hastings. Francesca Molteni is in Milan, and Sasha Hastings is in Toronto. With both of them, we had the opportunity to collaborate on putting up exhibitions and other activities, mostly related to architecture and design. Francesca, and with them, in a conversation with them, we've been able to find out the 4 keywords that should act as metaphorical cardinal points for this discussion, trying to map this reality we are in now. And so we came up with these 4 keywords, and which are void, body, breath, and care. For each of these keywords, we decided to invite 2 speakers, 1 Italian and 1 Canadian speaker, in order to have them presenting their point of view starting from their specific field of expertise and for their specific field of activities. And today we have two architects, Bruce Kuwabara from Toronto and Davide Pizzigoni from Milan. I will leave Francesca to introduce the two speakers, and I'm sure you will, I hope you will enjoy the conversation, and I hope it will manage to give you some food for thought, and this would be a success if we manage to do so. So I hope you will come out of this conversation with some new ideas and perspectives. Thank you very much, and Francesca, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alessandro, and thank you to our first two guests, Davide Pizzigoni and Bruce Kuwabara. First of all, I want to thank Sasha and Alessandro as well for the opportunity to share this, let's say, particular and peculiar moment with some conversation that we hope can help in a way to give a new perspective and a new future, let's say, to the thoughts that we had in the past month. And for sure, it's not easy to start a conversation with the term void. It's a very complicated topic. It's like starting a reading in silence, a concert with a pause, or a performance in the dark. In a way, it's exactly the opposite, because these are all the possibilities. This void is the possibility for the words to come after: body, breath, and care, the four key words that will follow the conversation. Void is just not, let's say, nothing. It's the opposite in a way. Is the possibility of forms to be. We don't think at void just as a whole. Void is a consequence also of a process of destruction, of cutting, of in a way disturbing the reality. Void is also the, let's say, possibility for the common ground to be. For, if you think about cities, for example, the squares, the Italian piazze, the possibility for people to meet, to exchange, and to share from different, let's say, parts of the city and life of the city, what they have in common. And void is also a memory. It's a trace of the past, of what was before there. And sometimes it's better to maintain that void, not to erase the trace. We will see with our guests what they prepared for us in terms of images as well. I will introduce them briefly, and then we will have a moment of debate and discussion. The three of us, but with you as well, that are invited to share your questions, and we will try to reply, staying in, let's say, 1 hour, 45 minutes. Let's come to Bruce. Bruce Kuwabara is one of the founding partners of KPMB Architects. For many of you, of course, it's a well-known firm, architecture and design firm, but for us in Italy, he has a very interesting point of view. He founded the studio in the firm in 1987, and he won a lot of awards and prizes as the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada Gold Medal. And he, with the partners, did a lot of projects all over the world. But what is mainly interesting, I think, of this practice is that they are very strong in making old architecture new again. And this is very interesting for our topic, of course. We will see some of the projects in the presentation, but it's interesting, this particular point of view, how we can maintain and restore, let's say, don't cancel the memory and maintain some of the voids that are with us. You will find all the presentation, of course, in the website of the Istituto, so I will not go, it doesn't take me longer to explain. Davide Pizzigoni, he is an architect, scenographer, artist, and author. And in the same year, 1987, when Bruce was establishing his studio, Davide began a collaboration with Olivetti, designing posters, covers, and many, many other objects for the famous Italian brand. So it's a coincidence, we were not aware of that, but it's an interesting coincidence. Davide, he's a very peculiar architect. They are both architects. Davide started, let's say, one particular research on void when he worked for the opera, the set design of opera in Tokyo, in Japan, in Germany, all over the world. And of course, theater, the stage is a void in a way. So it's very interesting. And it's one of the reasons why he also started the research on the shape of the empty space. I'm very curious to see what's going on today between these two different points of view. So I leave first the word to Bruce and to start his presentation. Then we will have Davide and then a share moment of discussion. Bruce.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Hello, everyone. For sure, void is charged with meaning, and we're in very uncertain times. And when we speak about the spatial condition and human experience of void, we can certainly speak about emptiness and distance and ineffable loss. A void can be a cancellation, creating an absence, but a void can also be intentionally formed. I'm being assisted today by Robert Faber, and I'd ask him to begin the slideshow, if you could do that. The first image has incredible meaning for me. I'm a Sansei, or third generation of immigrants from Japan who came to Canada seeking a better life. And I took my children to Hiroshima in 2018 to witness the sight of a void whose impact ended the Second World War. And everything that I saw, and nearly everyone who was in the city, was disfigured, emptied of their outlines and their vitality. In Hiroshima, as void stands as one of the defining events of the 20th century. Then I looked at another building that had a powerful effect on me, which is Daniel Libiskin's Jewish Museum, which I saw before it was open to the public. So I saw this building that was empty, but the incredible aspect of it is that Libiskin constructed a void that slashes through the zigzag plan of the museum, which itself was defined by lines connecting the homes of Jewish artists, writers, and intellectuals in Berlin. The path through the museum crosses the void, and there is nothing in that void but emptiness. And you are left with a powerful sense of loss and a palpable awareness of the loss of Jewish lives. The next slide is really an unintentional void. Public spaces of gathering and communality have been emptied, as Francesca and Alessandro have said, and the emptiness is deafening. This urban void caused by the pandemic makes us conscious of what and how we can be together when we are apart. In America, in Brooklyn Bridge Park, social distancing has become, ironically, a kind of art form. And we are intended to gather in this graphic theatrical setting as tableaus or still lives, social bubbles in a void. The next slide is very important for all architects and people. It was an 18th century project by the French architect Etienne Boulet, who did an unbuilt project for the cenotaph for Isaac Newton. And he created a pure and sublime spherical void. At the bottom was to be sited the sarcophagus for Newton. In America, Gordon Matta Clark in the 1970s was a radical artist architect who incised a powerful void, a conical intersect, by using a chainsaw and cutting away the floors and walls of an existing building. And he called it an architecture, which is anarchy in architecture, as he disemboweled an existing architecture. But the idea of void isn't constant, it changes. And so I love this project. I think it's the greatest building in America. Jonas Salk asked the great architect Louis Kahn to design a building that inspires people to ask questions. Kahn's laboratories sit high above the Pacific Ocean in La Jolla. I've been there 3 times, and every time I've been there, there were people asking questions. There were 8 Nobel Prize winners on site the last time I was there. The great Mexican architect Luis Barragan was asked by Kahn to landscape the courtyard. And Barragan, presented with Kahn's plan for a grove of orange trees, recommended that no trees would be planted, but instead there would just be one narrow canal of water leading to the horizon and the ocean. And he created what I think is a positive void. In Japan, in Naoshima, Tadao Ando created an amazing experience, not a typical Ando building. Visitors enter the building in single file with a hand on the shoulder of the person entering before them into pitch black darkness. Once inside, your eyes adjust to a very small amount of light, and you only then begin to barely make out the features of the room. And it's an imposed loss of sight that is slowly recovered until you leave and re-enter the daylight. In my work, we are not asked to create voids. That's not part of a client's request. It's more of a concept of creating voids, and we've done it deliberately in 2 projects. One, the Center for Mathematics at McMaster University, where in that blue zone, you see in the diagram, the plan in the section to the left, we incised and cut and removed part of the building to bring daylight into the building and interconnect all of the floors and to bring light from above and air from below. So this void is, I would say, a positive constructed void that would actually create a healthier and better building. And the last project in Toronto is Canada's National Ballet School, where we designed the dance studios under the direction of the artistic director of the school, Mavis Staines, who asked that we would design the studios as voids. And the studios are white voids with indirect lighting that can be filled with the movement of dancers and the creativity of choreographers. And the studio voids are not dark, but daylit. And you can see on the right, they are stacked and are visible from the street, creating a city of dance. So for me, I just want to thank you for allowing me to kind of move through time and to reconnect with architecture that has had tremendous significance for me. And so the concept of void for me is not singular or static. I invite you to go on the journey to really think further. I would like to think that it's very open to interpretation and ultimately hope. So thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks a lot. Thank you for sharing your, let's say, personal story and the story of your family as well. I think that we all experienced in the lockdown period, and also now a different attitude towards the others, the other people, our family as well. We are all trying to fill that void in a way now that we can, little by little, and with all the precautions, start to think from another point of view. We're not what we were before, and we're looking for a new way to establish and to share relationships and let's say thoughts. That's what we are doing now. We are sharing from Toronto to Milan a new way to look at what we have around and to look at buildings, cities, common spaces, squares and streets, with the idea that they are not just, let's say, a passage, a way to go from one place to another, but they are really what makes us feel together with the others. It's a new point of view that we have to investigate. The meaning of these conversations are just to explore together some words, keywords, and concepts that we experience in our daily life, in our professional life, and in our, let's say, way of being humans, and not just people with an established profession or a family. So that's the meaning. So thank you, and I want to now open the discussion with Davide as well, with his presentation. I know that I have to thank Davide because he's a French speaker, Italian speaker. The English, I know that it's an effort also for him, so thank you so much, and please.
Okay. Thank you, Francesca. Hello to everybody. Today, we are talking about the void, and I'm very happy about that. Also because it's a real obsession for me, which started something like 25 years ago, around 1994. And like many obsessions, the obsession of void started for me in my childhood. It happened when I was 14 years old, as I read a story by Edgar Allan Poe, and the story is The Pit and the Pendulum. It's a short story, and the story of a man, prisoner of the Spanish Inquisition and condemned to death. He doesn't know in which way he will die. He's a prisoner in a dark room with no lights at all. But slowly he understands in which way he will die. The walls are moving inwards, reducing the empty space of the room, while a razor sharp pendulum is suspended over his head and goes down slowly. A terrific situation. And for me, it was a shock, and it was my first approach to the void as something real and concrete with the body. And then I forgot. It remained an obsession, which I didn't realize since I started to work. And it's important to know that I graduated in architecture in Rome in the 80s. And at the beginning, I started a personal research on space with drawings on architecture and making drawings of forms that inhabit space. But the turning point came in the early 90s when I was asked to design sets and costume for the theater. I started with 2 operas. The first one was Die Faune Schatten by Richard Strauss, which made the theater and the stage familiar to me, because the stage and what you design for the stage is very different from what you design in the world of architecture. Is the space seen from the inside. And the second opera is that which led me to change my view on things. And it was Gesualdo. Wait a minute. Gesualdo, for which I designed set and costume. As you can read, it was a world premiere for this opera composed by Alfred Schnittke, a contemporary composer. And for this second opera, the revision of the space happened for technical reasons with Gesualdo, thanks to Gesualdo. As Gesualdo had a duration of 90 minutes, during which more than 20 scene changes had to take place with the curtain open. To solve the problem, I designed a theatrical machine that could be continuously modified like a body, but a body seen from the inside. And this body was the void. There I started to focus my attention on what lies between things and void. I realized that it was more interesting to me than things that have a shape. After the show, I started, it was urgent for me to study what that void was. I did it with the tools of drawing, with the watercolor technique, from the watercolor technique to that of oil, to that of charcoal. The drawings allowed me to understand that to represent the void, it's necessary to make its limit invisible, make its perimeter invisible. Otherwise, what we will see will be what is around the void, the shape that stay around the void. The following step was, here we can see other drawings, but the following step was obviously to realize a real void. I built a space using some black sheets and randomly arranged them to form a whole. What interested me was having a space without quality, even without color, just a hole, a black hole. So I started photographing that space by changing the position of the lights and then adding colored jellies to the lights. What happened was a continuous surprise. That space without quality, that void, always took on different forms. It was a body, and it was a body in motion. We can see some samples. Then the following step was the big dimension. In 2005, I was invited to create an installation for the Ancient Roman Theater in Paris, which French name is Les Arènes de Lutèce. Lutèce is the ancient name of Paris. That was an opportunity to implement and verify the research on the empty space. I designed a multimedia installation that would lead the public to perceive the void as a body, with its own identity and its own breath. The title of the installation was The Breath of the Emptiness at the Lutèce Arena. As you can see on the left up, it was a volume 5 meters tall with an elliptical plan that recalled the shape of the void of the ancient theater. A black volume with a longitudinal cut to allow the passage to the public. As the audience passed, the black walls became white, thanks to the backlighting, increasing and decreasing intensity like a breath. This is a picture taken from the cut. Then I want to show you some following developments. that have in common the attempt to show the void without showing its limiter, its perimeter. And then some memories that have accompanied my work over the years. The one you can see here are big holes in the stone, like in Matmata in Tunisia or Abaneri in India, to more complex one like Ground Zero, as you can see on the right, or not contemporary, ancient like Lalibela in Ethiopia. Maybe later. No, I think that is interesting to look at those two pictures together. Lalibela was carved in the stone, but it's not just a hole like caverns. It's a volume. Is a volume that has been carved inside the stone. But this hole has a volume inside with a hole inside. If we look at the moment, the ground zero, in ground zero, there is a big hole, and we know there is a volume of light inside, and again a hole, a second black hole. And this is an homage to Lucio Fontana and his holes. And just to end my presentation, I want to show you this very short movie of 80 seconds. Okay. And at the very end, some opportunities. At the moment, it is not yet possible to realize it for technological reasons, as the roads are not able to do that. But I think it's only a matter of time. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Davide. Thank you so much. Very inspiring both. So I hope questions will come, but we can start also our short discussion. Bruce, I want to start from you asking if you see any, let's say, common definition of void between, I mean, you started with a very strong image of reality, a void that is so powerful that we don't even need to speak. And ground zero is the other, let's say, very strong image of the last century that, I mean, we will bring to, I mean, it's in between actually the two centuries, but two images that will bring the memory with us forever. So is there any, in a way, common reference between your vision and Davide's vision of void? Aspetta, your audio is, do you mind to turn on your mic? Thanks.
Yeah, I think, first of all, that was very interesting, Davide. I mean, the last video was incredible, and we should make that happen because I think it's really extraordinary. It's a magic carpet roof tent. But what I was going from was the reality to optimism. And I think, you know, Davide's last piece is a perfect conclusion because you go from Hiroshima to something which is what I would call much more positive in terms of what the world needs is healing right now. We have so much devastation on a daily basis. It's just the constant, you know, wake up every day and you just see the news, and whether it's Beirut or, you know, when I saw Beirut, I saw Hiroshima. I mean, it looked so similar to me. Everything was melted. I have friends who are Lebanese, and so it's an extraordinary tragedy. And one of my friends said that, you know, his aunt was living in one of the apartment buildings near the harbor, and her window blasted inwards and knocked her out. The frame actually hit her on the head. She suffered a concussion. She did not die, but again, I was thinking about Hiroshima and the atomic blast, and it scares me even to this day to think about that because it remains a possibility in the world that we inhabit. It's a very dangerous time. So my interest is much more in understanding all of that as background, which I'm absolutely sure Davide has gone that same route, even though he's been obsessed with it. Whereas for me, this was a kind of journey that was just triggered in a very short period of time. But at the end of the day, it brought together, for me, some of the high points of architecture, incredible conceptions of void, and they're all different, utopian sometimes. And then going to Davide's work, I thought the segue from the ballet school, where they see the dance studio as a stage that ultimately becomes public. I thought that was an interesting connection to his notions of kind of, because the void anticipates something else, and that something else is life and hope. And, you know, without people, there's nothing, no void even. You know, it's a psychological and experiential phenomenon. If you subtract us out of the picture, there's nothing there at all. And same with architecture.
Of course, you're right. I found also another, let's say, I mean, I'm very surprised that you both, let's say, start and ending to with the images of memories and let's say full of history and full of importance for the world, and not just for your singular, let's say, experience and practice. But what I also noticed is that you both use movement. I mean, you design for the ballet, meaning for designing a void for people that should move in order to, you know, inhabit the space. And Davide did a little bit the same, of course, with the stage, with the opera and the theater. So I would like to ask to Davide if you think that what's going on now will influence the theater and the artistical practice in the theater on stage, if it's helping, if it, once we will go finally back to theaters and cinemas, if you think that it will be part of the story on stage, in a way, what we are living now.
That's an interesting question, as today the people doesn't go to the theater for the necessity of the distance. So people now prefer to be alone, maybe in the middle, in the center of the nature, between the mountains, in communion with the sky, the universe. And they prefer to be just with the people they love, friends, parents. And so for the short time, the situation is leading to form small communities, moving communities also, just not to be closed in a space with walls, and nomadic community. I see that this is the shorter term, the shorter end. So the theater, I think it is difficult today. I see that the people doesn't go. You go to the theater, and what you see first before the show, you see the distance from the other people. The only place where you see people together is on stage, but what you see on stage is a desire. So at the end, you risk to see the impossibility. So it's una pena. It's a pain. So, but what I think is interesting now in this moment is that people is looking more for communities, interest, feelings, and so on, and a sort of a tribal approach, which probably is better than yesterday, because yesterday we could see people more oriented to the technological device and the body without a real body. And about the body, what I feel, but since many years, for me the void, the empty space is a body. Is a body, as said Bruce before, that has a sense if people living stay in this empty space, in this body. So the body of the empty space, if we can see, we can think is the body of the community, or maybe the body of the community, moving like the flying roof.
Yes, we have a question. I mean, two similar notes on the Q&A from the audience. A question for Bruce and Davide. Just before this conversation started, the news came out that the Metropolitan Opera in New York has canceled its entire 2020-21 season.
Terrible.
And the building will remain closed for a year at least. Other spaces of gathering for cultural events all around the world will likely make similar announcements. And this presents a huge, long-lasting cultural void to people everywhere. We were discussing about it. So Bruce, now I pass you the question. How do you think this cultural void will affect us, and what do you think we can do to fill this void without physical spaces to share culture together?
Such a challenging question. You know, I chair the board of the Canadian Centre for Architecture in Montreal, and the gallery actually just reopened, but, you know, looking forward, the research and even a lot of the programming is all about our digital platform and really growing that, and which has been a very strong development, and you should certainly visit the website to see how the website is even designed to try to create a dialogue with all of the supporters of the CCA, and it's a big international network. But it will never replace, you know, the aura, the actuality of artifacts because we have one of the world's great collections of drawings and photographs and models, and I've been in close proximity to them, and it's a very different feeling, and people are, I do not know how you can replicate that in a digital universe. And, you know, I remember that Marshall McLuhan, he said that when one technology replaces another, the former becomes an art form. And so he was using the example of penmanship. And so now everyone knows how to do a click, but you can't even read your own handwriting. You know, the loss of the art. So anytime you see someone whose handwriting you can read, it's almost an art form because it's so rare. It's so rare. And so I think what's going to happen when we come out of this pandemic, and I believe we will, there will be a whole new reawakening of all of the things, because for me, the biggest loss is my connection to art and performance. I love going to the theater. I love going to the opera. I love going to see art. I love standing in front of art. And it's really hurts right now. But in the meantime, the strategy is, I hope, an interim one. And then I think the world after the pandemic, we're going to see a very hybridized world. You're seeing it already. I mean, that's what McLuhan also said. He was really could see the future. He said that, you know, the technologies will not fully replace the other. They'll be side by side, which is already going on. But I think the art of conversation, for example, will be renewed, and everybody's, I think, thinking about what's essential to your life. Like, what do you really need besides, say, food and water? I think art is right up.
And the dog to go walk. So I'm living just in front of the Piccolo Teatro in Milano, the famous theater founded by Giorgio Grassi, and then with Giorgio Strehler as the master for many years. And there's a small lunette at the top of the roof, designed by the actual location was designed by Marco Zanuso, the Italian architect and designer. And there's this little window, pyramidal, like a triangle, and there's a light on when the show is on. So in the month of the lockdown, my terrible view from the window was that light was turned off all the time, all the nights. And I was so used to that presence. It was like the theater is alive. So what I was proposing, and I'm passing let's say, the proposal to Alessandro, to all the cultural institutes all over the world, and to you and to our friends, is to share like readings at home. Readings like, you know, that Poetry Society, the famous film, when you go underneath in the canteen and you share with a few people, but maybe with the technology that we have now, we can share with a wider audience. So what we are experiencing in few people that know each other and can share, invite an actor from, I don't know, from Canada, online to share also a lecture, piece, a book, something that can make us feel alive, let's say. So what do you think, the two of you, about these private theaters?
Yeah, and no, I would like, I agree with you, and also more with what said Bruce before, the art of conversation. I think that the art of conversation will save us. And probably it's not a coincidence, but I read 1 or 2 years ago a book that I suggested to everybody, maybe you know it, and is The Art of Conversation, is a book by Benedetta Craveri, an Italian writer, but the book has been translated also in French and English. And in this book, she tells the story of the art of conversation in France in the 18th century. And this art was, we can say, what was cut by the French Revolution. And so was cut by a dramatic moment. And I was very impressed reading this book, and I think it is very actual. So the art of contemporary, the art of conversation, I think that probably is the has to be our main goal now that we cannot stay cheek to cheek, and now we are conversating, and anyway, is a pleasure, and the conversation is not material as the empty space, but I think that we have to think about its body and how can we make it more visible, like the empty space, and something new. So probably it's difficult now to understand which may the body or the different body, but is the easiest thing, not so easy, but is what we have to do now to survive.
Thank you, Davide. So Bruce, it's to you, and then we have a last question from the audience.
So, sorry, I think that you know that it does question everything. This pandemic has questioned everything I value, and I think it's so uncertain. I don't know how long it goes on. I've tried to reset. I think everyone has reset their lives. And I think that, you know, I feel fortunate even to be invited to this event because it allows me to feel like a human being and connect with people around the world on a subject which I'm interested in. I'm not obsessed by it like Davide. But I fully appreciate, you know, his life dedicated and his work dedicated. I'd certainly like to put on my bucket list coming to Milan to seeing a production where he designed the set, because that would bring it full circle. So you can put me on that list right away, Davide. Like, I'll come over as soon as the flights are ready, and you know, this connection is an invitation to continue a conversation. And similarly, if you're ever here, you know, let's get together and have dinner.
Thank you, Bruce. So we have a last question, then we have to say goodbye to the next conversation, and we see you in 1 week with new guests, but you are invited to join us, of course. So for many people, let's say, we are losing a lot of external stimulus for meaning. The isolation, the social isolation has been very difficult for many people. Maybe it has even revealed an internal void in many of us. How do you see that? Of course, we already a little bit discussed about losing art, music, performances, readings. That's enough to feel really, let's say, empty in a way in our life. But what do you think about the internal void that is not just physical and spatial? Davide, maybe?
I have to apologize. There are questions on the chat line, and one of the ones was what we thought about having the audience muted.
I've seen it, but they can write. I mean, the conversation is open even with the writing.
I feel very badly. That's how I feel.
No, but we can have a theater next time if Alessandro can allow us to choose like some real, not just spectators, but also actors in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm joking, but it's part of the story of what we are learning with the on-air possibilities. Va bene. If you want to add anything about the internal void, or we can thank you and announce our next conversation for next week.
Now, maybe I can add something very quickly. For me, internal void doesn't exist. Void is a body, a flowing body, and with no limits. And is a body that in which contain you and the other people. Is a body that connect you to people, to other people, and is not something limited, closed, like a building. Is something more free, more plastic and moving at the same time. Living body with no limits. And is a body that lives through you. Without you, it doesn't exist, as said Bruce. There is no void without people inside. It's nothing. That's all.
Yeah, that's really good. I think you just answered one of the chat line questions.
Exactly. Yeah. You're right, Bruce. I would read, and maybe it's interesting to pass the last question to the next conversation next week about body. I think that the main problem concerns the young generations. They are already used maybe too much to digital experiences, and now more and more. Which real experiences can we guarantee for them? My fear is that the young generation will lose completely the contact with the reality. It's a good question for body, which is the subject, the topic of next conversation. But if you want to say just a very short reply to our young generation, how can we help them to not to live just in a, let's say, in a movie, in a way?
I think one of the great premiums, I used to think that you know, young people were really so interested in everything that was in a handheld device, but you know, we did some work at Princeton, and they told us that the youngest people, like the people in their 20s, actually were seeking out contact and community, which was a surprise to me. Because it's the McLuhan thing, that they were looking for the premium experience is the real, it's the face-to-face. And so they set up on campus areas where there is no Wi-Fi. You know, you take it, you remove it, you void out the cellular in order to get to the, you know, the direct contact. And I think you're going to see that it always happens. There's always a counterbalancing move. And also in the pandemic, even in our office, it's the youngest people who are have the most anxiety because they feel isolated, and they no longer are going out and having fun. In fact, now they are going out and having fun and causing, I think, the second wave. You know, there's an incredible desire for communal experience, and it's time immemorial. I think it'll always be there as long as we're human. So it's going to be very interesting. I don't think there are any rules, but you're going to see these forces kind of flow out of this pandemic as people realize what they're really missing. and that's human contact and communication.
Thank you, Bruce. Teach them to notice architecture. As one more, let's say, note from the audience. Davide, if you want to add anything, otherwise I would like to thank not the muted audience, but the writers that are communicating with us, Clive, Jacqueline, Natasha, Roberta, and many others that are writing in our chat. I would like to thank, of course, Davide, Bruce, Alessandro, Giorgia, and the Istituto Italiano di Cultura staff for making this conversation possible this time and for the next 3 weeks. Next Wednesday, we'll have Sasha Hastings moderating a conversation with Zab Mabungu and Chiara Cappelletto, 2 Italian ladies, 1 Italian lady and 1 Canadian lady next week. So we'll have also gender confrontation. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you to the audience and see you in 1 week. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye to everybody. Bye, Bruce. Bye.
Bye, Davide.
Alessandro.
Bye, Francesca.